So we have spoken about sports, cinema. Now this is about women at work. Women today comprise only 18% of the workforce in the top 2,000 NSE-listed companies. 18% only. And these are the companies that have the wherewithal and the means to invest in diversity. In fact, gender equity, diversity, inclusion is not a checklist for them, it's a boardroom agenda. Despite this, the needle isn't moving. We have leaders here to talk about this and more. So welcome. Sushmita, you have a very long career. You are a women leader, but you started in STEM, right, as a chemical engineer. So can you talk to us about, what was the journey like when you started as a young management trainee or an intern in a factory? So what was the experience like? And do you also think that as you grew in your career, took on middle manager, now senior management positions, have the biases or have we evolved as a society?
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Sonal, for the question. In fact, before I answer how I started, I'll talk to you about a brief about, how the whole thing happened, even how I got even placed. So when you do your BTech and in chemical engineering or any BTech, you have a summer trainee in the third year. So during the summer trainee, we were only two girls who were getting training from a huge British multinational, more than 100 years old in India. And we were working very well and we were enjoying our stint as summer trainees. And we were the only girls in the campus, in the manufacturing unit, which was in the outskirts of Calcutta. I come from Calcutta. So we were towards the close of the training. And we also, the inquisitive us, we were asking that, we did a good stint, our project was good. Why don't you place us here? So the information that we got, what we were told, is that we don't hire girls. So I went up to the head of the department, and thankfully he gave me 5 minutes to speak. And I asked that, do you hire talent or do you hire gender? And that started the conversation. In fact, a year later, when I was preparing for my finals, I got a call at home that come for an interview. And we were interviewed by the topmost authority, the MD of the company. Why? Because they were taking a risk. They were thinking of hiring women. And I'm talking when I was 20-year-old at that time. And we went through the interview, we were selected and got placed. And when you talk about the environment, it was a male-dominated environment because I'm talking about a paint industry. In the shop floor, there were only operators, all men. The entire campus had men. The only one lady who was there was in the administration, who was also an assistant to the head there. There were no restrooms. In fact, when you are in a manufacturing setup, you have to wear personal protective equipment, the safety gear. There was no safety gear for women. So I remember I did a stint for a year in the factory, and I had to wear size 7 shoes because the safety shoes, the minimum size was size 7. I am a size 6. So that was the, and in terms of the washroom, to use a washroom, as I said, the only lady was in the admin department, which was about 1 kilometer away from the location we were there inside the factory. So to use the washroom, you had to walk 1 kilometer. So we used to time our washroom breaks because that was our canteen for food. So to put it simply, you have to control how much water or anything, fluids you drink because you have to use the washroom. So I'm talking about those situations. But then I'm very thankful that, they gave us the opportunity because we were the first. And the questions were also about physical ability. Will they be able to do the work? The commitment, are they committed? It was not about capability. It was about physical ability, commitment, and stability. What if you get married tomorrow? What if you start a family? So those were the questions which we were asked when all we were looking for was to be treated as humans with talent. So that was my experience, but I'm happy that I started because from ours was the first batch, and I'm talking about late 90s, that they started hiring women, and they used to come for campus, and the next batch and the next batch, it was like a gate opening, and women, they started hiring women. So I'm very proud that I took up the step and had that 5 minutes. He gave me an audience time of 5 minutes. I could go speak, and the doors opened for more women in that organization. Today I see a lot of change. MNCs, metro cities, a lot of change is happening in this space. It's much more inclusive. There are a lot of initiatives in the DEI space which we talk about. So there are a lot of stuff which is happening, and the world is changing today. And thankfully it is, because 50% of the population is women, so 50% of the talent is also there. And if you don't hire, you lose out.
Yes, we all know that, but it doesn't really work that way, does it? So Kanika, we heard from Sushmita about her experience very early on in her career. You are an independent women director on boards of many, many companies, right? And in fact, today, 97% of the companies have a women board director. So, and of course, thanks to the regulation that we have such great numbers on that front. But has that also led to any change, or is it still tokenism? What is your take on it?
It is, firstly, thank you so much, and thank you so much for India Today to make this thing happen. And I have to congratulate on one thing. It's like I've been seeing the delegate tags, which have got these beads on it. A small touch, whosoever thought about it, phenomenal, really great. Yeah, being on the board of companies and being you see in my introduction, woman director, and the point of writing that was, yes, it's mandated. The government is saying, and all of us are talking about we need more women in the workforce, and yes, a mandate came through, and I was the beneficiary of that mandate to some extent, saying, I'm actually on boards of companies where I'm neither the founder nor it belongs to a family, and truly as a professional, I've come onto these boards. What does it mean to be in these places? For any one of us who's been a professional, you are now at the top group of an organization and you are in the decision-making group. Do you actually have a voice? Are you actually driving those decisions? Or is it because it's a compliance and it has happened? My response is it varies. It varies from companies to companies. Some companies really want you to be there, and they look at you, as Sushmita said, as humans, and they want you to participate and really take your word and your knowledge, and that's what they've gotten. But in India, a dominant amount of companies are still looking at you as that gender who's sitting there, who needs to be there. Research says and study says that when you have one person, one lady who's sitting on a board or in any group, that's tokenism. When you put two women in a group, that means they're going to compete with each other. And when you put three women in a group, then that forms a cluster, and then that becomes a cohort. So something to think about. As you guys are thinking about building your teams, is it that can you try and put three people in a group and try and put that structure together? Being at the boards, being at a place when you've got a seat on the table, it's hard to find your own voice at the first place. You have to work at an individual level very hard to find your voice. Yes, one person on the board often lands up to be tokenism. But it is you your responsibility, it is me, my responsibility to convert and make something out of it and be patient. It will form an agenda. And it has taken me a lot of time to learn and change my own self and be those allies. So while getting on the board is a first step, it is just the beginning. We as women have to support each other, and there's a lot of awareness generation and education that needs to happen. I've been on boards in situations when people have told me, Madam, बहुत हो गया, अब बस ऐसा भी होता है, ऐसे भी conversations में बोला जाता है, but you've got a seat on the table, use it. So yeah.
Sushmita, before I come to you, I'm going to ask Kanika the second question. I'm hearing a lot of bias, right? Subconscious bias, unconscious bias. So so very early on in your career, it's also very difficult. You also don't know कि मेरे साथ ऐसा हो रहा है या हो सकता है या क्यों हो रहा है, right? So how do you see that bias gets normalized in a workplace, right? And also how to deal with it? How did you learn to deal with it? Oh, I mean, we are speaking and smiling here, but I mean, I'm sure it wasn't the case when we learned about it, ki haan, like we are being victimized here, no?
No, what you're putting towards is a much more broader questions. You know, there's a society we live in. There's normative things. There's a social norm. You know, घर पे अगर खाना बनता है, टेबल पे रोटी आती है, तो 99% सिचुएशन वो या तो बच्चे के पास जाती है या पापा के पास जाती है. The patriarch of the family very rarely is the first roti given to the lady of the house. अभी भी अगर आपकी maid आपसे बात कर रही है, so she is going to ask you for all this. So these biases are so normative and so deep seated into the culture कि उसको immediately बदलना मुश्किल है. 99% of the time तो आपको खुद ही नहीं पता होता कि ये biases हो रहे हैं आपके साथ. For me, I think a lot of times it was somebody else who pointed it out. Did you realize that this happened with you? I don't think I realized it till a very late stage in life that there is a bias which is existing, because I'm also brought up in the same society, a similar kind of a household, and you just take it as normally. You will take the responsibility. You will take the caregiving responsibility, whatever else it is there. But the first step is getting to that awareness of it, that, hey, it is happening, and being able to understand and then voicing it. Interestingly, our data says a very interesting fact. We've done some research of looking at about 200 HR professionals, you know, and this is slightly on the bias side. But जब भी किसी HR professional के पास resume आता है, तो इस resume के अंदर if there is a woman's resume, 43% of the time they look at whether the woman is married or not married. Only 22% of the time they look at the resume and say whether the man is married or not married. Now, ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, देख लिया, but इसका bias क्या है? Bias ये है कि दिमाग में रहता है कि if a woman is married, there's a possibility that she will maternity leave पे जाएगी, कितने time काम करेगी, is it an investment or is it a cost that we do? For a man, he's there at work and he will just stay at work. I don't think any of the HR professionals consciously look at it. It's something which works in the subconscious, but it has a rolling effect over a period of time. Now, I hope that because I've shared this data and I've just spoken about this, that the HR professionals who are sitting in this room are going to now either try and remove that bias when they're looking at resumes, or at least be aware of it. So to me, that's like potentially the first step, as I said, of creating awareness and then moving forward to it on the biases.
So, Sushmita, you have been a leader in a lot of companies, Jubilant, ICI, Samsung, now DCM Shriram. How have you seen that this bias also comes into company policies, people policies, right?
So I'll tell you, in fact, the biases are there because, and sometimes it is invisible, and sometimes it is also unintentional, because the policies are made by men. The decision makers are men. They are discussing and they are deciding. So sometimes they are not empathetic, or sometimes they're just ignorant about women issues. And that's where, I've seen policies. like for example, I'll give you an example like a medical policy. Now, a medical policy will have a lot of, there are in the group medical policies have different various types of surgeries, and there are caps in the surgeries. And I was sharing this with you. In one of the organizations that I've worked, and I've seen that there is a difference. And the difference is so stark and so bizarre that when I raised my voice, the next year the policy got changed. And I mean, I'm talking about biases in medical policies, because there are, of course, maternity and hysterectomy and cataract. You know, some certain surgeries have ceilings and, cappings on the surgeries. So because the men were deciding, and they never thought that this was a requirement. So I'm talking about those biases also. Sometimes the bias is also about, flexi-working. And suppose if you have a flexi-working and we are told in organizations that it's to support women talent. But then the same women talent who will, avail these policies are sometimes very subtly penalized. Oh, she's always away. She's working from home. She can't do the heavy lifting. So, though you have a policy and you have the right to avail a policy, but then those are the whispers that go around, those subtle comments which you see, which you hear, and which you feel. You can feel the vibe. And so many and so forth. I can talk on and on about various other biases, but then for lack of time, I gave 2 examples.
Yeah, thanks. Kanika, as Udayti does a lot of research around workplaces and enabling women participation at workplaces. So what does data say? What does your experience say as you work with companies, government and private, on like, while the policies are there on paper, sometimes like Sushmita is saying one policy is not there, but a lot of times policies are there, but they still don't work. In fact, there is a lot of data to say how maternity benefit is actually a double-edged sword. So when do they really work?
$1 million question. So I'll break down the response in two aspects, right? One is looking at policies from the private sector perspective, organization perspective. The other is looking at policies from a government perspective. There are 2 levels of policies which are happening. And then on the private sector side, there's a policy which is looking at the white collar kind of a set, and then there are policies which are more government policy, which are more looking at wider range of people who are working in the manufacturing units, etc. Right? Now, in the private sector, our data and the research really says that 72% of the women of the organization says we want more women in our workforce. Great. Only 21% actually get down to putting some active work towards active action planning towards getting more women in the workforce. Only 21% of the 72% who claim, and they've signed some agendas and said yes, on their annual reports they'll go ahead and do the pink washing and the lip service, as we often call that, right? Now, what is that 21% which are doing different, right? And they're very small things they'll end up doing very different. If there's an interview panel, right, add women in the interview panel, right? Have a mixed interview panel. Make sure at stage 2 or stage 3 of an interview, you actually have a woman candidate coming forward, right? So these are one set of things or set of activities that happen to get more women in the workplace. The second set of things really happen is how do you enable women to get more advanced? Interestingly, again, the data says that women get a lot more mentorship, men get a lot more sponsorship.
Right.
What women are really looking for is more sponsorship at this point in time. And this is where the maternity aspect really comes in. Because what happens is we will mentor women and we'll go ahead and say, oh yeah, it's very important, it's very nice. Sponsorship is actually pick her and give her an opportunity, right? 26% of the women, actually women lose out about 28% in their pay because of the maternity holiday that they'll end up taking, and the growth kind of stops. That's significant. That's significant in a 20-year, 30-year career journey. If there are more sponsors, if there are approaches which are taken differently, which is possible when you start looking at maternity as an investment in a woman's career rather than looking at maternity as a cost to the company, you can actually change the mindset and the policy. So this is on the private sector side and a bunch of different things. On the government side, on the policy, what the government is really saying is, yes, we are right now spending about 4.6 lakh crores towards gender. We are saying that we are going to increase the women labor force participation by 70% by 2047. That's the target we've put in there. We are going to create enabling infrastructure. So we're going to create housing, we are going to create transportation, we are going to make our cities safe, etc. And they have allocated enough and more money towards these initiatives. It's still about 1.8% of our budget. It's not really 5% of our budget right now, which the World Bank is going ahead and saying. But still, what the ask there is that, are there enough implementation partners? Can the private sector come in and do something about it? The challenge which we are facing right now, and what can happen to your question on policy front, is there are enough resources. There is an integrated effort which is needed. Some places private sector has to work with the government. Sometimes it's the internal change which needs to happen within the organization. There are in pockets enough and more examples on policy shifts. First step is mindset shift. You have to believe it is important.
The toughest one.
The toughest one. It's the biases to your question, biases in the mindset shift, and everything step by step will follow, and all of us have a role to play in making that happen.
Okay. I know time's up, but I have one last question. I know Ranjit is looking at me, but okay, so, women are labeled in our culture, right? If, like one of the bureaucrats said, if you're accessible, you're considered available in a workplace, right? If you're outspoken, you're aggressive. If you're too soft, you're not meant to be a leader. So this whole problem, what economists call double bind, the problem of double bind, right? How do women navigate that? So your quick 2 takeaways, what is your advice to women, ambitious working women? Sushmita.
I think be calm, focus on content, and be clear about what you want. Because, I have faced, similar sort of stereotypes that if you are assertive, then you are perceived as aggressive. Whereas this another man who in the same team, if he is assertive, then he is a great leader. He is perceived to be strong, and so on and so forth. So I would say hold your ground, speak up. If you don't subscribe to a certain comment or a certain statement made by somebody, I would say silence. While it's very comforting, it doesn't change anything. So raise your voice, which you have. You have got a seat at the table. Make full use of it, so that others can follow. And when you speak up, you actually make space for the women who may follow you in the same space in any organization. So that's my take on it.
I think in the same vein as Sushmita is saying, own it. There is nothing else that you can do owning except owning it. And the stage that we are in our journey, I think success for us as women is not going to be about me breaking a glass ceiling. It is going to be about how many other women I can take along as I break the glass ceiling. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a fantastic discussion. I learned a lot, and I hope you did too.